YorkTown, 1781. The final battle of the American Revolution has ended. The ground is heavy with the smell of gunpowder, sweat, and death. Rows of British soldiers lay their muskets down and surrender. Drums beat hollowly as men march away, defeated. For the victors, it is a day of triumph. For the fallen, it is just another graveyard. But in the shadows of this grand surrender, there is another story. Not every soldier left the battlefield. Some were swallowed by the earth, nameless, forgotten. And among them, one man's spirit refused to rest. His name was never written in history. Some say he was a farmer who took up arms for freedom. Others whisper he was a deserter, a man who never chose a side. But the legends agree on one thing: he died violently, alone, on the night of the surrender. As the generals signed papers by candlelight, this soldier's blood seeped into the soil, unheard, unseen. And with his last breath he swore an oath: "If no one remembers me, then no one will leave this ground in peace." From that night forward, strange things began. Villagers spoke of ghostly lights flickering in the woods. Hunters claimed they saw a man standing among the ruins, musket in hand, though no footsteps marked the earth. At night, a lone drumbeat echoed across the empty fields, slow, steady, as if calling an army back from the dead. Years passed, the war ended, the new nation rose, but YorkTown remained unsettled. Travelers avoided the old battlefield after dark. Children whispered of the last soldier, cursed to walk the land forever. And then, decades later, a young historian named Thomas Gray arrived. He did not believe in ghosts. To him, the revolution was a story of politics, of generals and treaties, not of restless souls. But he came to YorkTown with curiosity, determined to uncover the truth behind the local legends. He carried notebooks, maps, and old records. By day, he walked the fields, tracing the earthworks, studying the graves. By night, he stayed at an old inn, where the keeper warned him, "If you hear the drum, don't follow it. No man who did ever returned." Thomas laughed. He believed in history, not hauntings. But on his third night in YorkTown, as the clock struck midnight, he heard it. A drum, low, distant, beating from the old battlefield. Thomas Gray sat upright in his bed, heart pounding. The sound was unmistakable. A drum. Slow, deliberate, each beat carried through the walls of the inn, rattling the glass of the window like a faint heartbeat from the earth itself. At first, he thought it was a prank, a child perhaps, or some late-night revelry, but the rhythm was too steady, too old. It carried weight, like a soldier keeping time. Against the warnings of the innkeeper, Thomas grabbed his lantern and stepped outside. The streets of YorkTown were silent, empty. No voices, no footsteps, only that drum, coming from the direction of the battlefield. He hesitated. The wind was cold, tugging at his coat. For a moment, he thought of turning back. But curiosity, the same drive that brought him to study the revolution, pulled him forward. He walked the narrow road out of town, his lantern swinging, casting long shadows across the dirt. The sound grew louder. One drum, one soldier, calling him onward.
When Thomas reached the old earthworks, the air seemed to thicken. The grass whispered under his boots. He could see the outlines of trenches where soldiers had once fought, now overgrown with weeds. But the silence was not complete. The drumbeat continued, echoing between the mounds of dirt, impossible to place. Thomas lifted his lantern higher. The flame flickered, struggling against the wind, and then he saw him. A figure stood at the edge of the field, tall, rigid, holding what looked like a musket.
The man's coat was ragged, his hat slouched, his face hidden in shadow. Thomas froze, his voice caught in his throat. "Hello? Who's there?" The figure did not answer. Instead, the drumbeat grew louder, as if it came from within the man himself. Thomas took a cautious step forward. The figure raised its head slightly, and for the first time the historian saw the soldier's face, or what was left of it. His eyes were pale, cloudy, as though drained of life. His jaw was twisted, blood dried across his cheek. This was no reenactor, no living man. Thomas stumbled back, his lantern trembling in his hand. But the soldier did not advance. He only stood there staring as the drumbeat continued to echo from nowhere. Finally, in a voice that seemed to rise from the ground itself, the soldier spoke. You remember us?" The sound chilled Thomas to his bones. It was not one voice, but many, layered, echoing, as though 100 dead soldiers spoke through this one figure. Thomas swallowed hard. I study the war. I've come to learn your story." The soldier tilted his head. The musket gleamed faintly in the lantern's glow. "Then walk where we fell. Walk and see what we became." And with that, the drumbeat quickened, rat-tat, filling the night. The figure turned, stepping back into the mist of the old battlefield. Without thinking, Thomas followed. Each step he took pulled him deeper into the ruins, into the silence of YorkTown's past. But as he crossed into the heart of the field, the lantern flame flickered violently, the air grew heavy, and behind him, the road back to town seemed to vanish. Thomas Gray stepped cautiously into the center of the battlefield. His lantern flickered against the rising mist, casting shadows that seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. The drumbeat that had lured him here slowed, then stopped. For a moment, silence, then whispers. They slithered through the air, impossible to place. Men calling for water, cries of pain, the groan of a cannon wheel grinding across dirt. The past was speaking, bleeding into the present. Thomas spun in circles, trying to locate the voices, but every time he turned, they slipped behind him, closer, as if circling like wolves. Suddenly, his lantern dimmed, then flared, and the battlefield was no longer empty. Dozens of soldiers appeared before him, not solid flesh, but pale shadows, transparent like smoke given form. Some dragged broken limbs, some clutched their chests, wounds bleeding endlessly. Others stood frozen, eyes wide, mouths open, locked forever in their final scream. Thomas gasped, stumbling backward, but the apparitions did not move toward him. Instead, they repeated their final moments. One shadowy soldier fell to his knees, whispering for his mother. Another raised a musket, fired into nothingness, then collapsed. A boy no older than 15 clutched a drum, beating it with invisible sticks, his face streaked with tears. Thomas's historian mind raced. This wasn't random. This was Yorktown, 1781. He was witnessing the ghosts of a surrender, a final battle frozen in time. Then, from the mist came a cannon blast. The ground shook violently beneath him. Thomas staggered, covering his ears. The smoke cleared, and for a moment he saw the field as it once was. Lines of soldiers in blue and red coats clashing, muskets firing, men screaming. The stench of gunpowder, sweat, and blood filled his nose.
He blinked, and just as quickly, it was gone. The battlefield was empty again, the apparitions fading back into shadows, but the soldier he had first seen, the one who had spoken to him, remained. Standing tall among the ruins, his pale eyes fixed on Thomas. "You see now," the soldier said, voice echoing with hundreds of others, "we are not at rest. We were left behind, our names forgotten, our sacrifice buried under books and speeches." Thomas raised his lantern higher, his voice shaking. "But history remembers you. Yorktown is taught. The revolution is honored." The soldier's head tilted, almost amused. "History remembers victories, not the blood it cost, not the men who never left this field. We are the last, trapped in the moment of surrender, cursed to march forever." The whispers grew louder, a storm of voices pressing in around Thomas. He clutched his head, trying to block them out, but they seeped into his mind. Images flooded him, bayonets piercing flesh, soldiers digging shallow graves, boots trampling mud soaked with blood. He could feel their pain, their despair, their hunger, the weight of thousands of forgotten lives. His knees buckled. He nearly dropped the lantern. The soldier stepped closer now, musket dragging against the ground with a hollow scrape. "You came here to learn. Now you will carry us. You will speak our names. Or you will join us." The words chilled Thomas to his core. The battlefield seemed to close around him, the mist swallowing the world beyond. The lantern flickered violently, sputtering as though the air itself wanted to smother its flame. Thomas's breathing quickened. Was this truly a haunting, or had he lost his mind? The line between history and nightmare was breaking, and Yorktown's dead were demanding his soul.
Thomas's heart pounded as the soldier loomed before him, the musket dragging through the grass with that terrible hollow scrape. The whispers had grown into a chorus, voices crying, pleading, demanding. The battlefield pulsed with a life that was not life at all. The soldier lifted his face, pale eyes burning faintly in the lantern glow. "You do not understand," he said. "We are not free. The war ended, but not for us." Thomas swallowed hard, trying to find words. "Then what is it you want from me?" The soldier's lips curled into something between a smile and a grimace. "To remember is not enough. You must feel. You must know the weight of what we bore. Only then can you speak for us. Only then can we rest." Before Thomas could reply, the soldier raised a skeletal hand. The lantern flickered, sputtered, and then darkness. The battlefield shifted. The mist dissolved into smoke, thick and choking. Thomas staggered, coughing, but when he opened his eyes, he was no longer in 2025.
He stood in Yorktown, 1781. The ground shook under cannon fire. Muskets cracked like thunder. Men shouted orders. Screams of the wounded cut through the chaos. The acrid stench of gunpowder burned his lungs. He looked down. His clothes had changed. A ragged continental uniform clung to his body. His hands gripped a musket. Blood, warm and sticky, already stained his sleeve. "No, no, this isn't real," Thomas whispered. But the world did not answer. Around him, soldiers rushed forward, faces grim, eyes hollow. Some fell screaming, others pressed bayonets into enemy lines. A drumbeat drove them forward, relentless, merciless.
Thomas raised his musket instinctively, but froze. The enemy, red-coated soldiers, were charging straight at him, bayonets lowered. The look in their eyes was not rage, but desperation. They were boys, just like the ones beside him. He dropped his weapon. "I'm not supposed to be here," he gasped. "This isn't my war." But the line broke. Chaos swallowed everything. Thomas fell, trampled in the mud, the weight of bodies crushing down. The screams blurred into a deafening roar. Hands reached out from the dirt, clawing at him, bloody, skeletal, ghostly. He tried to tear free, but the ground itself seemed to drag him under. Then, the soldier appeared again, not as a pale ghost, but as he had been in life, young, uniform torn, blood streaking his face. He extended a hand. "Do you see now?" The soldier's voice thundered through the chaos. "We are endless. We fight and we fall, again and again, for eternity. This is Yorktown's curse." Thomas grasped the soldier's hand, desperate for balance. The world froze. The screams fell silent. The battlefield dissolved back into mist. They stood alone again in the ghostly field, the lantern reigniting at Thomas's feet. Thomas's voice cracked. "Why me? Why show me this?" The soldier lowered his head. "Because you hear us. Most walk this ground blind, deaf to our cries. But you, your blood is old, tied to this place. You were meant to carry the story, to ensure we are not erased by time." Thomas staggered back, shaken. I don't want this. I didn't ask for this." The soldier's pale eyes narrowed. "Neither did we." The whispers surged again, filling the mist with grief and fury. Thomas covered his ears, but the voices clawed into his skull. The soldier raised his musket, pointing it, not in threat, but in command. "Choose, Thomas Gray. Take our burden or join our ranks. Speak for the forgotten or march with us forever." The mist thickened, pressing in tight. The lantern flickered violently, as if deciding whether to burn or die. The battlefield held its breath, waiting for Thomas's answer.
Subscribe for more videos like this. We regularly share boring, sleepy videos so that you can sleep peacefully.